Welcome to a deep dive
Oh, cool.
into the fascinating world of emotion science.
Okay.
You've sent us tons of research on how emotions work,
Yeah.
and it seems like you want to get to the bottom of how these feelings actually operate.
Mm-hmm.
No jargon required.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We're going to uncover some surprising facts about emotions,
Okay.
and maybe even bust a few myths along the way.
Awesome. I think we'll definitely challenge some common assumptions today.
Okay, let's start with something I think we've all seen on TV.
Okay.
Those lie detector tests that supposedly reveal whether someone's lying based on their physical reactions,
Right.
like sweating or a racing heart.
Mm-hmm.
It all plays into this idea of emotion fingerprints, where we think each emotion has a specific measurable physical signature.
Okay.
But is that really true?
Actually, it's not as simple as those shows make it seem.
Okay.
Imagine you're on a roller coaster.
Okay.
Your heart's racing, you're breathing fast, you might even scream.
Yeah.
Are you terrified or thrilled? Same body signals different emotions.
Interesting.
That's because there's no single unique fingerprint for any emotion.
So you're saying even those classic expressions we think are universal,
Mm-hmm.
like a scowling face for anger, might not be so reliable.
Exactly. While some expressions might be more common across cultures,
Okay.
they don't always mean what we think they do.
Mm-hmm.
Studies have shown that even babies
Oh,
don't always scowl when they're angry or pout when they're sad.
interesting.
Plus, think about different cultures.
Right.
A gesture that means hello in one place might be considered rude in another.
Yeah.
It's all about context.
Okay, so forget fingerprints.
Right.
If emotions don't have these set physical markers, how do they actually work?
Right.
What's going on in our brains and bodies?
Well, scientists are moving towards a constructionist view of emotions.
Okay.
This means your brain actively creates your emotional experience based on a blend of your past experiences, the current situation, and signals from your body.
Okay.
It's like your brain is a master chef, combining ingredients to create a unique dish.
Yeah.
An emotion every single time.
So instead of emotions being hardwired, they're more like a recipe that our brain whips up on the spot.
I like that analogy.
Okay, cool.
And each recipe is personalized.
Right.
Think about how you experience fear.
Mm-hmm.
What triggers it for you might be totally different from what triggers it for me
Right.
based on our individual experiences and how we learn to understand fear growing up.
So my personal recipe for fear might include a memory of being chased by a dog as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
while yours might be linked to a scary movie you saw.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this leads to an important point.
Okay.
You need the concept of fear to actually experience fear.
Mm.
Your brain uses concepts,
Yeah.
those mental categories we form,
Yeah.
to make sense of the situation and your body's signals.
Hold on. Are you saying I wouldn't feel fear if I didn't have the word for it?
Think of it this way.
Okay.
A baby doesn't come pre-programmed with the adult concept of fear. They experience distress, discomfort,
Yeah.
but they don't understand it as fear until they learn the concept and
Mhm.
how it applies to different situations.
Right.
It's like learning a new word and suddenly seeing it everywhere.
Wow. So our emotional world is shaped by how we learn to label and categorize our experiences.
Yes.
But where does the body come in?
Right.
You mentioned it plays a role in this whole construction process.
Absolutely. Our body is constantly sending signals to the brain about its internal state.
But,
Things like heart rate, breathing, hunger, temperature.
Mhm.
And this is called interoception.
Interoception.
It's like your brain's internal sense of what's going on in your body.
So those butterflies in my stomach before a big presentation,
Yeah.
that's interoception in action.
Exactly. Your brain is picking up on those sensations and incorporating them into the experience of anxiety,
Okay.
along with your thoughts and memories about public speaking.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got these body sensations feeding into the brain,
Right.
and the brain is using concepts to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
But how do we go from simple sensations to complex emotions like joy, sadness, or anger?
Okay.
What's a missing piece of the puzzle?
That's where affect comes in.
Affect.
Affect is a more basic, general sense of feeling,
Okay.
like the raw material of emotion.
Got it.
Think of it as a two-dimensional map.
Okay.
One axis is valence,
Valence.
which is how pleasant or unpleasant something feels.
Okay.
And the other axis is arousal,
Okay.
which is how energized or calm you feel.
So like a mood compass.
Yeah?
I could be feeling unpleasant and low energy. Maybe I need a nap, or pleasant and high energy. Let's go for a run.
Exactly. And your brain uses this basic affect,
Okay.
along with your concepts in the context of the situation,
Okay.
to construct specific emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you feel a burst of high arousal and unpleasantness.
Okay.
In one situation,
Yeah.
your brain might categorize that as fear.
Okay.
But in another, like if you're about to go on stage, it might be interpreted as excitement.
Wow. So the same basic feeling can be interpreted in completely different ways, depending on how we make sense of it.
Right.
It's like our brain is constantly telling a story about our experience,
Yes.
using our body sensations, our memories, and the situation around us.
And sometimes those stories can be inaccurate or unhelpful,
Yeah.
especially if they're based on past experiences that might not be relevant anymore.
You mean like if I have a fear of dogs because I was bitten as a child,
Mm.
but now I encounter a friendly wagging tail?
Right.
My brain might still trigger the fear response even though the situation is different.
Exactly. Our brains are prediction machines,
Okay.
but sometimes those predictions are based on outdated information.
So how do we break free from those unhelpful predictions? If our brains are wired to predict, how do we change those patterns?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And one we can explore further. But first, let's talk about how language and culture influence our emotions. We've been talking about how our brains construct emotions from body sensations, past experiences, and the current situation.
Right.
But there's another layer to this
Yeah.
that's super fascinating, the role of language and culture.
Okay, so how do words and culture fit into this emotional puzzle?
Well, think about how we learn about emotions as kids.
Okay.
Our parents and caregivers constantly label our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling sad, you seem angry, that must have been exciting through language.
Yeah.
We learn to categorize our inner world and make sense of what we're feeling.
So we're not just born knowing how to feel.
In a way, yes.
Hmm.
Imagine a child who scrapes their knee.
Okay.
They feel pain,
Right.
but they don't necessarily experience it as sadness
Yeah.
until they learn to associate those physical sensations and the situation getting hurt with the word sad.
So the words we use for emotions actually matter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This leads to a concept called emotional granularity,
Emotional granularity.
which is basically the richness and complexity of our emotional vocabulary.
Got it.
Some people have a lot of finely tuned emotion words at their disposal,
Right.
while others have a more limited set.
So some people are like emotional sommeliers, able to distinguish between subtle shades of feeling, while others might just have happy, sad, and mad.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that studies show people with higher emotional granularity
Okay.
are better at regulating their emotions, coping with stress, and even making healthier choices.
Wait, so having a bigger emotional vocabulary can actually improve my well-being?
It can definitely be a helpful tool.
Okay.
If you can pinpoint exactly what you're feeling, whether it's frustrated, disappointed, or overwhelmed,
Right.
you're more likely to find effective ways to manage that emotion.
Okay.
It's like having a more detailed map to navigate your inner world.
Okay, so I need to start brushing up on my emotion vocabulary.
Yeah.
But this brings up a question that's been bugging me.
Okay.
If emotions are so deeply shaped by our individual experiences and what we're taught, how can we ever truly understand what someone else is feeling,
Right.
especially if they come from a completely different background?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of why emotion science is so crucial.
Okay.
While our individual experiences do matter,
Right.
there's also a shared biological foundation that connects us all.
Okay.
Remember interoception,
Yeah.
that sense of our internal bodily state.
Yeah.
That's something we all experience as humans.
So even though our emotional concepts might be different, we're all operating from this common ground of bodily sensations.
Exactly. We might use different words to describe those sensations or
Right.
interpret them differently based on our culture and upbringing.
Right.
But the underlying experience of, say, a racing heart or a churning stomach is something we can all relate to.
That's reassuring, actually.
Yeah.
It means that even if we don't always understand each other perfectly,
Mm.
there's a basis for empathy and connection.
Right.
But I have to admit, I'm still wrapping my head around this whole idea that emotions are constructed, not just hardwired reactions. It challenges so much what we're taught about human nature.
It does. It's like realizing that our feelings aren't these fixed, immutable things. They're dynamic, constantly being shaped by our brains and bodies.
Yeah.
And that realization can be both empowering and a little unsettling.
Empowering because it means we have more influence over our emotions than we might think. But unsettling because it raises questions about what's really real. when it comes to our feelings.
Yeah.
If emotions are constructed, does that mean they're not genuine?
That's a common concern, and
Yeah.
it gets to the heart of what it means for something to be real in the first place.
Okay.
Let's think about money for a moment.
Okay.
A dollar bill in itself is just a piece of paper,
Right.
but we collectively agree to give it value,
Yeah.
and that agreement shapes our behavior. We work for it, we spend it, we save it. It has real-world consequences.
So you're saying emotions are kind of like social currency.
Exactly.
They exist because we as a culture agree on their meaning and importance.
Think about the concept of romantic love.
Okay.
It's a powerful emotion that shapes our lives.
Right.
But it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Okay.
It's shaped by cultural norms, expectations, and stories.
So if I lived in a culture where arranged marriages were the norm, my experience of romantic love would probably be very different from someone who grew up watching Hollywood rom-coms.
Absolutely. Our emotions are embedded in a social context.
Okay.
And that context matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's why an emotion like Lijit,
Elijah.
which is experienced by a headhunting tribe in the Philippines as a feeling of intense excitement and aggression during a challenging group activity,
Wow.
might not make sense to us.
Right.
It's real to them,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't have the same meaning or significance in our culture.
This is so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's like our emotional world is this constantly evolving landscape shaped by our biology, our culture, and our individual experiences.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. We're
Yeah.
just beginning to understand the complexities of how emotions work,
Okay.
and there's still so much to discover.
Speaking of discovery, you mentioned earlier that our brains are prediction machines.
Yes.
And sometimes those predictions can lead to unhelpful emotional patterns.
Right.
Can we dive into that a bit more?
Absolutely.
I'm really curious about how this whole prediction thing plays out in our daily lives.
It's a key part of understanding how our body budget works.
Body budget.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. Okay, so you mentioned body budget.
Yeah.
Is that some kind of financial metaphor for our well-being?
It is, think of it like a checking account for your physical and mental energy.
Yeah.
You make deposits
Right.
when you do things that support your well-being,
Right.
like getting enough sleep, eating nourishing food, and managing stress.
Hmm.
And you make withdrawals when you're overworked, sleep-deprived, or dealing with difficult situations.
So if I'm constantly burning the candle at both ends, I'm basically racking up debt in my body budget.
Exactly. And just like with a financial budget, if you're constantly in the red,
Yeah.
it's going to catch up with you eventually.
Right.
Chronic stress, lack of sleep,
Right.
poor nutrition,
Yeah.
all of these things deplete your body budget and make it harder for your body to function optimally.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm.
But how does this body budget connect to our emotions?
Well, remember how we talked about your brain being a prediction machine?
Yeah.
It's constantly trying to anticipate what's going to happen next
Right.
based on your past experiences and your current state.
Okay.
And a big part of your current state is reflected in your body budget.
So if my body budget is low, if I'm feeling depleted and exhausted,
Yeah.
my brain is more likely to predict negative or threatening outcomes.
Exactly. It's like your brain is saying, hold on, resources are low.
Okay.
We need to conserve energy and avoid anything that might put us in further danger.
Mhm.
This is why when you're stressed or burned out, even small things can feel overwhelming.
Right.
Your brain is interpreting everything as a potential threat because it's trying to protect you.
That explains why I get so irritable and snappy when I haven't had enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I'm a bad person. It's just my brain trying to conserve energy.
Precisely. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing is that this can create a vicious cycle.
Oh.
If your body budget is low, you're more likely to experience negative emotions like anxiety, fear, or anger.
Right.
And those negative emotions, in turn, can further deplete your body budget. It's like
Yeah.
a downward spiral.
So how do we break free from this negativity cycle? How do we make more deposits into our body budget and shift those predictions in a more positive direction?
That's where things get really empowering.
Okay.
Because just as we can deplete our body budget through unhealthy habits and chronic stress,
Mm-hmm.
we can also replenish it by engaging in activities that support our well-being.
Okay.
Getting enough sleep, eating nutritious food,
Mm.
moving our bodies, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones. All of these things make deposits into our body budget and help our brains make more positive predictions about the world.
So it's not just about avoiding the negative. It's also about actively cultivating the positive.
Exactly. And the great thing is that even small changes can make a big difference.
Okay.
Maybe you start by going to bed 15 minutes earlier each night
Right.
or taking a 10-minute walk during your lunch break.
Yeah.
The key is to find what works for you and make it a consistent part of your routine.
It's like we're training our brains to expect good things, to see the world as a safer, more manageable place. But what about those ingrained patterns from the past? Those unhelpful predictions based on old experiences? Can we actually change those?
That's where the power of concepts comes in.
Okay.
Remember, our concepts are the mental categories we use to make sense of the world.
Right.
And those concepts, while shaped by our past experiences, are not set in stone.
Okay.
We can actually change them through a process called conceptual change.
So if I have a concept of myself as someone who's bad at math because I struggled in school, I can actually change that belief.
Absolutely. It takes time and effort.
Okay.
But it's definitely possible by consciously exposing ourselves to new experiences that challenge our old concepts. And by practicing new ways of thinking and interpreting information, we can gradually shift those mental models.
So if I'm afraid of public speaking, I can start by giving small presentations to friends, gradually working my way up to larger audiences.
Exactly.
And I can challenge my negative thoughts about being a bad speaker by focusing on the times I've communicated effectively.
Exactly. It's about rewiring those neural pathways, creating new associations, and building new evidence for a more positive self-concept.
Okay.
And this process can be incredibly empowering because it shows us that we're not just products of our past.
Right.
We have the capacity to learn, grow, and change throughout our lives.
This is all so hopeful.
Yeah.
It's like we're taking back control of our emotional lives. But are there any limits to this idea of emotional construction? Are there any aspects of our emotional experience that are simply beyond our control?
That's a great question, and it's important to acknowledge that while we have a significant amount of influence over our emotions, there are certain biological factors that we can't completely override.
Okay.
Our genes, for example, play a role in our temperament and emotional tendencies.
Right.
But even here, it's not a simple case of nature versus nurture.
So it's not like our genes predetermine our emotional destiny.
Exactly. Our genes provide a blueprint, but our experiences and choices interact with that blueprint to shape who we become. Think of it like this. You might have a genetic predisposition for anxiety.
Yeah.
But whether that anxiety becomes a debilitating problem or something you learn to manage effectively depends on a whole host of factors,
Right.
including your upbringing, your coping skills, and the support you receive.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how emotions work and the power we have to shape them. I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to my body budget from now on.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The field of emotion science is constantly evolving, and there's always more to learn. But hopefully this conversation has given you a solid foundation to start exploring your own emotional world with more curiosity and compassion.
It definitely has. And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of emotion science. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep embracing the power of your own emotional experience.